Okie doke. We're talking about the film. Now, this is one of your first projects where Danny Dyer isn't involved.
Mhm.
Was he considered for the role? Or?
No, not really, because I think that it would it just would bring nothing fresh to it, And I mean, I spoke with Danny about it, and I said to him, look, there's no, can't put you in the lead role because of the Football Factory, and can't put you in any other role because you're only really the lead role, and so there's a bit of a catch-22 there. So I said, just going to go off and make this film. It's only a low-budget film. It was essentially a fill-in project for the Sweeney, because we were, going to make that the year before, last year, and we made this instead. And so, at the sort of budget level that the film was made at, it's you had the opportunity to find new people, and for me that was really exciting. And it was a real big part of wanting to make the film for me, was the fact that you could you could go and find new talent.
And what brought you to that talent? What was the magnetic features of Callum and Paul?
Well, Paul was a ticket tout by trade. He's a proper, it's a ticket tout, and I met him a couple of years ago because someone had said, you've got to meet this guy. He wants to be an actor, and he's got plenty about him. And I met him, and I did really like him. And then when we were casting the film, I said, come in. There's a part. It was a much smaller part he came in for originally, and he was really good. He was just very, very strong and very magnetic, and he was too powerful for the part I had him in mind for. And so I just thought, was getting back for Bex and see what he's like. And actually what it was Paul and Callum together. I did 2 days, I think, of workshopping with them, and also the guy that plays Bob, the dad, Callum's dad in the film. Got the three of them together, did 2 days of just shuffling stuff about, and there was a very natural thing between the three of them. And in fact, there's a scene in the film which is quite a key scene where Bex humiliates Dom's dad in front of Dom in his work van, and they did it in this thing, and they did it so well, the three of them, that it was so kind of real and just natural. I thought, and I went downstairs. I remember saying to the finances, I've got the guys, this is them. Unfortunately, it's no one you've ever heard of. No one's going to help you sell the film in any way, shape or form, but I'm telling you, they're going to make a better film.
Excellent. And did you speak to Alan Clark or Gary Oldman when you were preparing and sort of going through?
No, I tell you who I did meet actually was because he was a trustee on Alan Clark's will. Not Alan Clark. Al Hunter Ashton, who wrote the original film. Al Hunter Ashton wrote the original script for Alan Clark to direct, and Al Hunter Ashton died 2 or 3 years ago, and his widow owned the rights to the film. He left her the rights, and she had, as the trustee, was one of the guys who was in the original film. I sat down with him and had supper with him, with Al Hunter Ashton's widow, and what was really good was he said that if anyone should make this film, you should, because you understand the genre, and and so he was pretty pro me making it. But in terms of technical stuff from for the film, I had a guy who used to run the Millwall firm in the 80s, and he was as good as you could ever get as a technical advisor on a film on a film set in the 80s about football violence, and so he was with me in my pocket every day for a year while we were making it, all the way through the casting, casting all the extras, the locations. He was on the set with me every day looking for the monitors, editing. He was in the sound mixes. I mean, he was absolutely all over the film, and he was brilliant. And we, well, apart from a couple of big arguments we had, which was silly on my behalf because of course he's 6.5 foot tall, but he was brilliant, in terms of creating something authentic, and also something that wasn't just about football violence, that was about the experience of growing up. He sort of understood that.
And with Alan Clark passing away, do you think he'd approve?
Probably not.
No.
I shouldn't think so. I mean, he was very militant, Alan Clark, and I mean, I was his biggest fan, I think, well, the thing about Clark was he hated football violence, and he was an Evertonian. He supported Everton, and he basically made the film as a kind of out of disgust of what he saw as something that was ruining the game. Whereas I, for better or for worse, don't hate football violence. I don't like it either, but I'm interested in it. I'm interested in why men fight. I'm interested in the whole kind of machismo and tribalism and stuff. And so I came at it from a very different film. So I guess if you didn't know either me or Alan Clark, and you sat down and you watched the two films, you'd probably very clearly say that there's one guy there who clearly loves that whole genre, and there's one guy there, Clark, who made a very nihilistic and dark film without any humour or kind of light, who hated it. And so the films are very different, as I'm sure you know. You know.
Absolutely. But you really hit on an interesting point. Is that do you think you've kind of given something relatively iconic for firms or people who involved in football violence in any way to kind of look to and sort of say, well, that sort of celebrate it a little bit, even if they wouldn't get it from that kind of sense of nihilism and sort of disgust from it? Do you think?
Well, I mean,
there's a danger there?
No, because I think listen, the guy dies, and Dom, the kind of protagonist, walks away. I mean, I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's any I don't think there's any danger in emulation, and I've never have done with my films. And I mean, I've been accused hundreds of times in the press of making films that cause celebration or emulation, and I think that's bollocks. Personally, I don't think they're powerful enough, actually. And I also think if someone's got the propensity to go and commit violence, a film's not going to stop them or enhance it. I think that you either have that part of you, I mean, I grew up watching violent films, and I've never been involved. I'm not a football star. It made me want to make films, in fact. So I think that they I think what they do actually is they do celebrate something. Is they celebrate male culture, and they celebrate kind of gang culture in a way, and what it's like the experience of being in it. But I don't think Dominic's journey in the film is particularly something anyone would like. In fact, they would probably like the first half of it. Then actually, once he starts getting bullied and beaten up in front of everybody, there's not so much to enjoy about that.
Okay. The future side of things, are we looking forward for anything in terms of a business sequel?
It's possible. I mean, the thing is I've made 5 films that are all essentially, and I'm very aware of it, a similar take on a similar world and a similar milieu, right? So I'm desperately to move away, but yet The Business was a brilliant film to make. I had a fucking good laugh making it, and it's a very well-liked film, actually, and it's sold insane amounts of DVDs. And if you've seen that film, you'll remember that it ends towards the end of the 80s with all the characters completely broke on their arses. And I've always wanted to make a film about Summer of Love, about the beginning of the rave culture, 25,000 kids in a field raving. No one's done that. I've always thought it was a brilliant moment in English culture. And actually, what that film does is it lends itself. The end of that film is almost the start of the rave culture, and so I have thought about the notion of doing a sequel. I think the other thing is, and I'll be completely frank with you, is that if you make low budget British films, right, to get anything that's a brand, that's something that's established, it's going to help it sell. I'm not making films for fun. It's a business for people. You're borrowing millions of pounds of people. You've got to give back to them. And so you've got to try and make films that make money. And if you make a film like the sequel to The Business, it's got a big audience, that film. It's been seen by millions of people, and it has big fan clubs, for better or for worse. I mean, some people hate it, do you know what I mean? That's up to them. But, and so on a purely business level, there's some sense in making a film like that.
And my final question is that you've discussed the Sweeney, but then you've also got another project, Gold Diggers.
No, I abandoned Gold Diggers.
So how's the Sweeney going then? What can we
well, the Sweeney is not dead. I mean, it has been dead, and it's a tricky one, the Sweeney, because it's essentially owned by an American studio, and so they want to make a very American film. I can only make a very British film because I don't want to kill the Sweeney, do you know what I mean? And so it's always been about trying to find the middle ground, about making something that they could be happy with, that I could be proud of making. And so we may be there now. We may be there. And so it would be exciting to make that film. And I've always maintained that I'd love to make it, do you know what I mean? But I couldn't make it unless I could put my own paw print on it, because, when you make a film, especially now with DVD and the way that your name's on a film forever, and so every film I've made, I'm probably going to live for another 35 years. You've got to live with every single one of those films every day of your life. Do you know what I mean? And so you've got to be proud of everything that you do. And I couldn't make the Sweeney with Angelina Jolie playing Carter, which is one of the suggestions. So going to make it the way I want to make it.